Muhammadu Buhari was born on the 17th of December 1942 and is currently serving as the Commander-in-Chief of Nigerian Armed Forces and the President. He's a retired Major General in the Nigerian Army and previously served as the nation's head of state from 31st December 1983 to 27th August 1985, following a military coup. In December 2014, he emerged as the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress for the March 2015 general elections. He won those elections, defeating the incumbent president, Goodluck Jonathan. This marked the first time in the history of Nigeria that an incumbent president lost to an opposition candidate in a general election. His running mate is Professor Oluyemi Oluleke Osinbajo, born 8th March 1957 in Lagos. He is, of course, currently serving as Nigeria's vice president. He's a lawyer, senior advocate of Nigeria, and also a professor of law. He has served as Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos State. Until his inauguration as vice president, he was a senior partner with Simmons Cooper Partners, a commercial law practice in Lagos. Welcome to the candidates, Mr. President and Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Now with us tonight are also members of the diplomatic corps, civil society, political parties, and of course citizens who have questions for our candidates. I too will have some questions, but as important are also the questions that are coming from those of you watching us at home. So, if you want to participate, here is how to do it. Send your questions on any of the following social media handles. On Twitter, at The Daria Media or NTA News Now. On Facebook, at The Daria Media. On Instagram, at Daria Media NG. Now, throughout these programs, these handles will scroll on your screen, and don't forget to use the hashtag #NGTheCandidates. Otherwise, your questions may get lost. Again, remember to tell your friends and family in the diaspora that they can watch this program online. We are streaming live on dtv.media and NTA NG Live. Now, let me turn to Mr. President and Mr. Vice President. You've been ruling Nigeria now for close to 3, almost 4 years. You want Nigerians to give you another opportunity to do another 4 years. Why?
Well, I said it much earlier at our National Executive Committee of our party, that if my party recommends me to its executive, I will contest. And I did that to save time and wide discussions among members of the party. So those who felt very strongly about it, they left the party, and the party nominated me. Why? Is because I felt that the 3 fundamental objectives we campaigned on in 2015 are still relevant. And we want to remind Nigerians to see when we started, 2015, where we are now, what we have been able to do in between this time of 3.5 years with the resources and the time available to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. Vice President, do you want to add a little bit more to tell us a little bit more about why you think the Nigerian public should nominate you and Mr. President again to serve for another 4 years?
Yes, I think so. I think Mr. President has already pointed out that we campaigned on 3 fundamental issues, namely the economy, corruption, and the fight against corruption and security. And in those 3 respects, we believe that we have laid very strong foundations, and I very strongly believe that we are on to much more progress if given a second opportunity. I very strongly take the view that the period of 3.5 years in particular has been one where we have managed to turn around a lot of what was inherited in the previous 16 years. And the previous 16 years were, in my view, a period which a lot of revenue came in, but very little appeared to have been done. And we believe that the foundations we've laid in agriculture, foundations we've laid, and I'm sure Mr. President will elaborate on that as we go on, in infrastructure, the foundations we've laid there really deserve a second time for completion. But I'm sure we'll come around to those specific issues.
Absolutely. But you talked about the three things that you fought the first elections with and which you think you've done well. So maybe if we could take them one by one and see whether we can have a conversation. Let's start with corruption, because that was a big thing that the president fought on. There's a perception that the general corruption fight that we see under this administration is a little bit skewed, and that it focuses on people who are not pro-government or who are not friends of this government or who belong to an opposition party. How do you respond to those allegations?
Which allegations?
That your corruption fight focuses only on people who are opponents of the APC or who are not friends of the APC.
Well, I think that's not a fair criticism or observation, because it's not backed by facts. I don't think there is anybody that has been pointed out as corrupt in the last dispensation, which we look the other direction. I think I can best illustrate my experiences on this. When I came in uniform in 1984, we arrested the president, the vice president, the governors, the ministers, and put them in detention and said they are guilty until they can prove themselves innocent. We put committees of investigation almost based on geopolitical zones. And those that were investigated, except two Nigerians, late Biamun Usman, a junior minister of education, and late Adam Chiroma, a governor of Central Bank, and a minister of finance, were the only people who were found to have managed their resources with integrity. But I myself eventually was arrested and detained, and those people who were found guilty of misappropriating public funds were given back what they were misappropriating through thorough committee investigation. It's not just an allegation. They were given the chance to talk. So I decided to come now, and now I have to be careful. People are just not arrested like that, but when they hold positions, if they made a wrong declaration, it's just one point. They didn't mention how many houses they have in Europe and America or Asia, and they didn't mention the companies they floated and the contract they gave them. If eventually uncovered, they are faced in court with the documents.
So, Mr. President, you're here obviously referring to the case of the Chief Justice of the Federation, or who are you referring to? Is that an example? Because you talked about people who are not declaring. This is what is topical now, and I'm wondering whether that is the case you're referring to.
Sorry, you have to repeat that question again.
Okay. Let me ask it another way. You've talked about people who do wrongdoing and being investigated. There are cases of people that are thought to be very close to you. An example is the former secretary to the federal government, Malam Babachir, allegedly accused of taking money that was meant for IDPs and awarding contracts to himself. As far as we know, the EFCC has not investigated him, even though he has lost his job. He is one of few other examples of people who are in government who've got petitions against them in front of the EFCC, and the EFCC is not investigating. And the general perception is that the reason why those investigations are not taking place is because these are people who are either close to the government or who are in government.
Well, I'm not too clear about your question, but if you can mention the names.
I'll give you an example.
Yes.
I said Babachir, the former SGF, the Minister of Housing, Mr. Raji Fashola. There's a petition in front of the EFCC by an NGO. And as far as I know, that has not been investigated. So I'm trying to understand whether you are aware of these things, and if this is part of, as it is alleged, part of a policy not to investigate people in government.
Well, we can't, to be fair to individuals, I told you why I have to be careful. And if anybody, the public should help us. If there are strong allegations and people backed up by evidence, bank accounts, names of companies floated, contracts awarded, then we take them before the courts through EFCC and ICPC. And we have to trust the system and allow them to complete the investigation. If we just take people in, as we did during the military area, and lock them up, this system, the present system, multi-party democratic system, does not approve that. If you accuse any person, you have to produce the evidence in court for him to be prosecuted. So, if there is strong allegation, the government may decide to ask people to go, like the former secretary to the government you mentioned. We ask him to go. But if anybody...
But the question is, after asking him to go, how come he hasn't been prosecuted? Which is what Nigerians are wondering. If there was a strong enough evidence to ask him to go, it means there's an indication that maybe he did something wrong. Why hasn't he been presented before a court and charged with corrupt practices?
It's still before. I think the matter is already before the EFCC. And I believe that, in fact, a directive has been issued regarding all persons who have cases before the EFCC. I'm sure that you will find that each and every person who has an allegation against them and has been duly investigated will be put on trial without a doubt. Each person.
Okay. Let me specifically come to you, because yes, the National Assembly has also raised what they say are concerns about money that was misspent within the presidential unit on the Northeast. You chair that unit, and they say you basically appropriated money without going through due protocol. How do you respond to that allegation?
No, I think the allegation was that some money which was approved for the emergency intervention in the Northeast was without appropriation.
Yes.
But that's not correct at all. And we pointed out very clearly to them that while I was acting president, the sums of money in question were duly appropriated. As a matter of fact, if they had looked, and we've shown all the evidence to them, and I do not think that we have since got a reply from them, what we were able to show them was very clearly this. The CBN, that's the Central Bank of Nigeria, controls the strategic reserves, agricultural strategic reserves. They are the ones who would raise a memo to me saying specifically what was required for the Northeast intervention and where the funds will be taken from. The funds were taken from what is called a rice levy, which is a duly appropriated fund. And after that, I then approved the sum of money, properly appropriated.
Are you at all concerned about some of the allegations raised about that, the spending with that particular fund and the way they are running the affairs of the agency?
I'm not at all concerned about it. I believe that, unfortunately, a good part of that was politicized, and allegations are flying here and there. That was a very comprehensive, very, very comprehensive process. What happened was that after the World Food Program had said that they were no longer able to feed the numbers that they were feeding before, there was a need for us to intervene because hundreds of people were coming out.
So it was an emergency situation.
Oh yes, it was an emergency situation. And then what then happened was, we then took a very detailed process. I said it started from the central bank and the strategic reserves. We have 4 companies that hold our strategic reserves, and they are major grain companies: Olam, Walcott, Dangote. I believe there's one more that I can't remember their name. They hold the strategic reserves for the central bank. So everything was done properly. The Nigerian Armed Forces, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, all of them, the police, all of them were involved in the distribution process, including the Air Force. Each service chief sent a senior representative to be involved in the process of distribution. We then went a further step. We created an office in Maiduguri where we have a tracking device. We could actually see the buses, the trucks, as they went from point to point from our offices in Maiduguri. We then included members of the National Assembly from the Northeast Zone to ensure that they were carried along and they understood what exactly.
So why do you think the National Assembly would make such a serious allegation?
Well, the National Assembly, as you know, I think that what they were saying was, and the reason why they were saying whatever they said, it will be left to them. But I think that as far as we are concerned, we went through the appropriate process and we did the distribution appropriately. But I don't know exactly. If you look at the entire report, the only line of that report where there was any kind of allegation, at least against me, was to say the money was not duly appropriated by the National Assembly. But we proved that that money was duly appropriated by the National Assembly, and there was no further allegation, as far as I could see, concerning my participation as acting president at the time.
Now, the National Assembly, in talking about this, quoted Section 80, subsection 4, which basically says that you can't appropriate any money, whether it's from the consolidated account or anything considered public funds, without going to the National Assembly. And in their view, that process didn't take place.
The point I'm making is that their view was absolutely wrong, because it wasn't based on facts. We provided for them evidence that they obviously did not have at the time when they were making their conclusion. And that evidence was the fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria was the one that originated the memorandum from an appropriated fund. That fund is called the rice levy. The rice levy is a line item in our budget, so it's already appropriated by the National Assembly.
Okay.
So I think that they were wrong.
Yeah, let's open up the conversation. So obviously this is a town hall. I don't want to dominate it. I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. So there are 2 mics, and we'll call maybe 2-3 people. Please introduce yourself, ask your question, go back and sit down, and then we'll come back to Mr.